Ichigo Kurosaki has spent the last few months acting as a substitute soul reaper, guiding good souls on to the afterlife and defending innocence from evil. However, these halcyon days are nearing their end, as the Soul Society has finally taken notice. Today on Truth, Beauty, Comics.
Welcome to Truth, Beauty, Comics. I'm Levi, cartoonist.
And I'm Felix, a guy who likes comics.
And this is the podcast where we look for transcendence in the pulpy medium. And on today's episode, we're going to be looking at volumes very tail end of 6, 7, and 8 of Bleach, the manga by Tite Kubo. And I feel like this one kind of is bringing us to a close with the stories that we've been talking about up to this point. It definitely goes in a different direction and a different arc after this point. Yeah, it was fun because as I looked back, obviously being a Bleach fan now that you've converted me, and I just kind of devoured. And I didn't remember much about this part of the manga, so it was fun to kind of slow down and read it because I think even in kind of the transitional moments, it's still very good. There's a lot of good stuff here to read. But I don't know what were your thoughts on these volumes? Did they have a special place in your heart, or?
Yeah, well, sort of. I it's funny. They're ones that I feel like with the exception of the introduction of the character Byakuya, whom I'm sure we'll talk about in a bit. I a little bit when rereading tend to sort of blow through these because Soul Society arc that starts with 9 is just so kind of perfectly plotted, right? And it's so propulsive that I don't tend to, in a way, pay that much attention to these. And I think this time, preparing for our conversation, I was more aware of how these volumes really are starting to expand the world of Bleach. They change the orientation away from a kind of small town monster of the week format that I really like, and I might be sort of in the minority. A lot of people, so oftentimes shonen manga will start out kind of small scale and then get bigger and bigger and bigger. And there's good reasons for that. But because of that, I think a lot of the time people, whereas I often really like those small sort of intimate volumes. I think of this one manga I really like, Yu Yu Hakusho, where the first 3 volumes are almost a different series from the whole rest. And everybody else sort of that I hear talk about it thinks of the early volumes as kind of boring necessity to get to the later stuff, whereas I find a lot of the later volumes really boring because like more than half of them are tournament arcs, and mention of Dragon Ball, I find tournament arcs pretty dreary. And so I have a real love of these early volumes, but I think Bleach is unusual, where for me, like, both the kind of early intimacy and a lot of the later, more world-shattering things really appeal to me. And I think Kubo does a really good job kind of starting to introduce the Soul Society as not just a kind of pie in the sky thing that's referenced, but as something that we're going to spend a lot of time with, and beginning to kind of also kind of giving more of an indication of the lore, which has been pretty minimal up to this point, and is actually becomes one of the things that is most appealing about Bleach, is these sort of distinct power systems and the kind of imaginative development behind them. Most especially the Soul Reaper's weapons, the Zanpakuto, and the sort of Shikai and Bankai releases,
Yeah.
and all the kind of like drama, but also just extremely cool design that comes from that.
Yeah.
So those things kind of stuck out at me a lot more on this read as kind of things that um, are just done really well, where like we start to get more of a sense of this wider world and more of a sense of the kind of like, I don't know, spiritual mechanics or power system, however you want to talk about it, that have been in the background but are now starting to come to the fore after you're already really deeply invested in Ichigo's story and sort of Rukia and others. Yeah, I don't know. What about you sort of on returning to these? Anything that kind of stuck out at you?
Yeah, I enjoyed this. It was funny rereading this. It reminded me a lot of, I was like, oh, there's a lot of Empire Strikes Back in this arc here, where it's, main character is like captured and kind of thing, and the apprentice is defeated and has to train under like a quirky master kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I think these are things that I'm sure George Lucas just kind of stole from Japanese culture to some degree, and so they're appearing here. But yeah, it's transitional, but on a very in a very good way. In the same way that I think Empire Strikes Back is my favorite Star Wars, but it's a transitional one in a
Mm.
lot of ways. But it does build, build and expand kind of the story into new directions that were kind of previously untapped. Yeah, and I do think. I mean, we'll get a lot more, I think, probably into the Soul Society, but this is maybe the first indication, maybe before with kind of the Quincy's a little bit, but this is the first indication I think that we get that, well, maybe these aren't necessarily a purely benevolent organization, or,
Yeah.
they're kind of almost more like the FBI in the sky. It feels like,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like, there's a lot more gray with the Soul Society than I expected,
Yeah.
because it seemed to me like you're dealing with kind of a heaven and hell, because we've seen at this point that Hallows, evil Hallows go to hell, and it's kind of like they're the agency who's administering justice. Something like, think again, to go back to Star Wars, the Jedi, right? In the original trilogy, the Jedi are in the background, but they're clearly noble, good guys, like these noble, chivalrous knights, kind of, So, whereas the Soul Society, once it shows up, it becomes much more of a, I don't know, I guess it's a much more of a bureaucratic organization than I expected, with kind of moral gray areas. Yeah.
Yeah, and you start to get sort of sense of that um, in these volumes, when in volume 8, I think it is, when you're really starting to see a bit of what Byakuya and Rukia are going through in the Soul Society. So shall we crack open the tail end of volume
Yeah.
6? Yes, we've
Let's
got
do it. I'm
just a couple
gonna.
chapters in 6, and then we're on to 7 and 8. So after this sort of huge uh, battle against tons of hollows and a Menos Grande, um, with the Quincy Uryu, um, there's a clear kind of demarcation of like new story here. And in in this beginning of chapter 51, you can sort of tell, so for context, these manga, right, generally published in black and white, but when being serialized, Weekly Shonen Jump, where Bleach was first published, will generally have each week one or two comics that have the first few pages in color. And you can sort of tell that happened because
Yeah.
the shading is super different on the first couple pages.
Right.
And it'll often happen at the beginning of new arcs. And so there's this really sort of stylized images of these two Soul Reapers, whom we haven't met yet. We're going to find out that they're Renji and Byakuya. And it becomes clear that they're being sent to capture or kill. He says, "This isn't a job for a Soul Reaper, is it?" And the other one says, "It may be." Um, which sort of starts us on this. It's this very sort of atmospheric opening, and we go back to kind of
Yeah.
school time. School time. No, I mean hijinks might not be quite the term, but it's sort of the aftermath of what was going on, and we get this one scene with Rukia where she's sitting up in a tree, and a bunch of the girls from school ask if she wants to join them for lunch, and she does. And there's this very I don't know. It's almost kind of a comedy manga, like a high school comedy manga for a few
Right.
pages, um, and it's interspersed with her running away and Renji and Byakuya showing up. And so one of the girls asks, "Do you like Ichigo?" And Rukia sort of spits out her drink, uh, and she says that they're just friends. And there's this really funny kind of interaction where Orihime is sort of saying like, "Oh, that's disappointing. If you'd liked Ichigo, it would have been two girls against one, and we would have won." And it's like, Orihime, that works in
That's not how it
martial
works.
arts and team sports. That's not how it works in love. She just has no idea what's going on. Um, and then, when we were talking before the recording, you sort of described Rukia's response as almost kind of disassociating, and I think that's apt, right? You sort of see her thoughts, love, romance. I think that stuff's boring. Feelings of attachment, affection, friendship, it's all boring. And the next page, if eventually I must leave this place, friendship and affection will only make it difficult. Friendship is really, really boring. And then there's jealousy. And this is really the first time where we've started to get a bit of a sense of Rukia's interior life, because she is this, especially up to this point, this very stoic character, and kind of some of that aspect of her personality is going to be contextualized in upcoming volumes as we get to know her background as sort of an adoptive member of the Kuchiki family. Um, but it's striking because she, at this point, you can't really tell how much is acting and how much is her genuinely enjoying herself, right? Because she often does seem to be having a really good time when she's with all these different high schoolers.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I don't know. I just thought this was sort of poignant. I don't know if anything about it stuck out at you.
Yeah, I think it's just very well done. It does bring up, I don't know, I think the or I always really, I know that what is it? Is it the in the anime everyone kind of like wants Rukia and Ichigo to be a couple, and
Yeah,
Orihime
the
the
early
kind of
couple
anti.
seasons of the anime have a lot of like kind of downplay Orihime and Ichigo's chemistry and play up a kind of Rukia Ichigo one. And the manga I think actually has very little of that. It's
Yeah,
much more
I think there's a
kind of the
little
other high
bit
school
maybe
drama.
here though. Maybe not. It's slightly hit. I think that um, you know whether or not this is meant to say that she actually does have some feelings for Ichigo or something like that. It does show that she's growing attached, and I think a lot of what's
Hmm.
going on here is kind of denial, maybe, of what's going
Yeah,
on. That she's so saying it's boring when clearly it's not. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Clearly, it's like she's trying to say like, oh, like she realizes that she's grown way more attached to these people than she should have, because she goes, at the end she's like, I may have stayed too long in this world, right?
yeah.
That she's kind of grown too connected to it. So yeah, it's a nice bit of, I think it's a nice bit of storytelling, because um it's not just hanging it's subtle, right? It's
Hmm.
actually like there's subtext to it, where it's not saying I actually do have feelings for Ichigo and I do like friendship. And oh no, it's said through denial, but you as the reader know actually the opposite is kind of what's happening here. And you're able to go, no, that's, you actually have grown attached to these people, and you do, even if there's not maybe love, but maybe there is a little bit of jealousy of Orihime, or something like that going on.
Mm-hmm.
And she's just kind of realizing it and, denying it in this moment. So nice, subtle, kind of complicated storytelling. I think it's good. Yeah.
Yeah. And we then are introduced to the two characters who are, well, I'd say two of the three characters who are um, most important for understanding kind of Rukia's personality and approach to relationships and this sort of thing. Renji Abarai, and her sort of childhood best friend, and Byakuya Kuchiki, her adopted brother. Now, Renji, I think, though he's quite like, in terms of style, already relatively established, I think, I wonder the extent to which Kubo had sort of fleshed out in his own mind what the relationship with Renji was going to be like, because uh, he's sort of angry at her, and it's clear that there's a certain pre-existing relationship, but it's going to be deepened a lot. Byakuya, meanwhile, I feel like walks onto the page fully formed.
Yeah.
He'll become like a little bit, as Kubo's art style changes a bit, he'll become kind of even more stylish in some ways, Byakuya, but he is this sort of emotionless, aristocratic, adoptive brother. And that, that's something that will sort of in much later volumes crack a bit. But I think Kubo really got Byakuya right from the beginning. And
Yeah.
I kind of, whenever this is gonna sound funny, but Byakuya kind of reminds me a bit of like a love interest in a Jane Austen novel. Like there's a
Yeah,
bit
good
of
call.
Darcy or a bit of George from Emma in him, where there's this sort of intensity, uh, deep care for senses, a deep strong, a deep sense of propriety, um,
Yeah.
but also this sort of like deep well of power, which obviously in Byakuya's case is actually this sort of not just a kind of social power, but a sort of physical, spiritual power.
Yeah.
And he has, I think, one of the cooler Zanpakutos. His weapon and fighting style is really compelling. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a very good call. It is interesting because when you mention that, I forget, like Ang Lee probably did the best Jane Austen adaptation as far as like films go. And then, it's often been said that like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, if you've, ever seen that movie, is Kung Fu Jane Austen, basically. So
I have not seen it,
there
but
is,
that's really intriguing.
oh, you haven't, oh, yeah, I love that movie. It's one of my favorites. But there is something where I do think that Japanese culture and kind of Regency era British culture actually have a lot of similarities.
Yeah.
There is just a real sense of code, propriety, honor, and just like, yeah, that I think to some degree we've lost in the West.
Yeah.
That that Japan certainly seems to have retained in some forms more than we have. But yeah, no, good call. Good call.
Yeah. So and I really like the cover of the next volume, volume 7 with Byakuya on it. I think
Yeah,
it's just
it's a
really
good one.
kind of, I don't know, it I don't know, just the depiction of his face, I think, is, I'm not sure how to articulate it, but like I feel like you could sort of pick up this volume not having read it and have a sense of his character just from
Mm-hmm.
that sort of facial expression. Yeah, I don't know. There's Byakuya, I think, is a really compelling character, and as we've talked about before, right? Each volume starts with a has a little sort of almost poem, kind of told from the perspective of the character who's on the cover, and this one is: "We should not shed tears. That is a surrender of the body to the heart. It is only proof that we are beings that do not know what to do with our hearts." And like that, just I don't know, it really it communicates a lot about his character really effectively. I'm
Yeah.
getting over a little bit of a cold, so my throat is starting to go. So if you summarize the next chapter, Levi.
Yeah, so we basically we meet Bakia and Renji, and they're here to pretty much kind of collect um, uh, Rukia, bring her back to the Soul Society. She's been hanging out too long on Earth, and it's time for her to go home. And she seems to be somewhat in trouble. We're not, I guess,
Yeah, it's almost a
exactly
kind of
sure why.
arrest. Yeah,
Yeah, it's much more. It's like, hey, you've done something wrong, which we seem to kind of figure out is to do with giving. They think she's given her Soul Reaper powers to a human, which she kind of has, and so they're she's in trouble with the up to this point mysterious authorities that run the Soul Society. So they're here to bring her home, but Ichigo shows up to intervene.
for a bit, and he's already kind of beaten from the last kind of confrontation with Hollows. He's still trying to protect her and is kind of defeated like that, you know. And then
Yes,
Ichigo,
right. Sorry, missed that part. Yeah, in Ichigo, I think this is an interesting one because up until this point, I think we've only seen how Ichigo does against Hollows, and he does fairly well, I would think. But now he meets um, actually other Soul Reapers where um, he's pretty clearly outclassed, I would say, and it's unclear just how outclassed he is. So the first combat is with Renji. And Renji, I'd say at first appears to be almost kind of a mirror of Ichigo. At least they seem to be coming from similar emotional places. They're both kind of brash, kind of talkers, kind of trash talkers, and at least very different than Bakia, right? And so they have a duel where I think Renji is clearly superior, but maybe not to the point that Ichigo gets in a few good hits,
yeah,
that kind of typical Ichigo style where he's down at first, but as the fight goes on, he starts to kind of figure it out and rise to the occasion. And there's a lot of insulting going on. I think one of the maybe the developments here is that they he thinks, wow, your Zanpakuto is ridiculous and you don't even know its name. He mentions that is one of the things that comes out in this. And so if you're reading along, you're like, well, wait, why would he have to have a name for his Zanpakuto?
yeah. This introduction of Renji's Zanpakuto, I think, is so great. Zabi Maru is his name, and like the
Yeah.
way the next page after he sort of unleashes the Shikai of his Zanpakuto, like it is brutal. It's I think this is one of those things where we're looking at the video is on YouTube is helpful because um or looking at the comic itself because it's hard to describe, but the sword effectively um changes shape and becomes almost like a chain where he
Yeah.
can sort of whip it, and each sort of link of it has not quite a fish hook, but not far from it. And he can sort of drag it across someone's body. And it just looks brutal. those two panels where it
Yeah.
first sort of hits him and then clearly gets pulled through him, and then well, I guess the third and fourth panel where you see Ichigo falling, is just I was reading, and I've read this probably a dozen times before, but I was reading this in bed the other night, and my wife was lying down next to me, and I turned the page and I audibly gasped because I was just so into it, and just like it was like I could feel the pain in my shoulder. I could just imagine how excruciating that would be. And
Right.
this I think like Kubo has been really good at depicting stylized action throughout, right? In a way that sometimes it's kind of sometimes it's relatively complicated. But he's really good at communicating to the reader exactly what's going on. But this is where we start to see the actual like it's not just a fight against a kind of brainless hollow.
Yeah.
It's not just a monster, but it's sword on sword, and it's swords with really distinct powers. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that like again is just communicated so viscerally here. So yeah, I don't know if this part sort of before we get to let's say Byakuya's intervention, if you have kind of from the artistic side any insights on how Kubo does this, and makes it work.
I don't know. Yeah, you're totally right. I think there's a lot going on here. It is. You mentioned the whole Zanpakuto um, introduction. That there's this is a whole new element that he introduces, kind of right at this point. I think it's just all been basically like swords, but
Yeah,
now they
just
have a
here's a big sword and I use it
yeah
to
to
kill a
fight.
hollow. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
and
not that
somehow
complicated.
as the story goes, he just kind of expands this whole like all these different fighting styles, um, really, really impressively. But yeah, this is where say like a page like we're looking at here, where he's using blood in such a way to communicate motion. It does look so painful. He's using sound effects here, and just picking all the right perspectives to get this. It's so good. There's something too about the way he does blood that I find. Maybe it's because one of the questions I do have is like, wait, why do souls have blood? They're such physical bodies in the Soul
Yeah.
Society. I've never really understood exactly how that works, but um, what I do like is it's somehow not. It's never like gross. I don't know. There's some
Yeah,
anime that
yeah.
I'll read that I'm just like, this is really disgusting and kind of unpleasant to watch. And there's
Yeah.
something about the way that I think Tide Kubo renders the action that it never feels like sickening kind of to me to watch it. It's
Yeah.
intense, it's visceral, but not in a um, almost just like disgusting way. I don't know, and I don't know
Yeah,
how he
well,
does it
it
either.
almost
Yeah.
the way that I would kind of think of it is like it's so right like as a general rule, an animated adaptation of something with violence is going to feel more violent than a comic or a manga. But but like so you're actually sort of seeing it all happen. But the thing that's so striking is Kubo is so good at really making me feel the motion. Just something about the way he
Mm,
chooses the precise moments to show in each panel what's happening. Um, I do really feel like it's all happening, but at the same time, like as you said, it's not. It doesn't feel right. Even when there is sort of blood, it doesn't feel and like really sort of intense violence. It doesn't feel gory. Um,
yeah.
it always feels like a PG-13 movie, never like an R one. If right, like it's
Yeah.
not. And it's really impressive to me because it's not a lot of the time the way that the comics will do that will kind of keep it feeling like a PG-13 is by not showing it very clearly.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean that's like quite a reasonable way to approach it, but Kubo depicts the violence that's being done while still, somehow not, I mean, frankly, like disgusting me in the way that
Yes, others
things like this
do.
often do.
Yeah,
Like, I don't tend to
yeah,
read stuff that gets really violent. I feel sort of uncomfortable with it. Um, and Bleach, like, there's a lot of intense violence that's rendered in some detail, but it doesn't. It it very rarely feels like it's crossing a line for me as I'm reading it. I don't feel
yeah,
uncomfortable reading it in the way that I do a lot of other things.
yeah. I completely agree because I do not. I will definitely say I don't like violent comics. I don't like. Yeah, and it's not just anime or manga because I know there's some manga I'm like I liked that story, but it was just gross. Like maybe
Mhm.
Chainsaw Man or something like that might be an example, something like
Yeah, I've
that.
not read Chainsaw Man because I've gotten that sense. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But here uh, maybe the one thing I would say is maybe the thing that I'm sensing from him is that it never feels sadistic to me.
Yeah.
It feels intense. It's showing, action, but there's not a like delight in the grossness of it that I think a lot of not just manga, but a lot of just superhero comics will go into as well. Like, let me just kind of do something really sick and sadistic, and I don't like that. And here it never crosses that line because it's always um, there's a difference I feel like between challenging your characters and abusing your characters for play, for our entertainment. And I don't feel like he ever goes there, at least not in what I've read up to this point.
And I
Yeah.
also wonder, it just occurred to me that I'm sure if I thought for a bit, I could come up with a counterexample. But generally speaking, the really when something really painful happens to a character, it's a character we care about.
Right.
Right? It's not usually the really painful things are not happening to the bad guys.
Hmm.
Uh, right? I mean, they'll be
Yeah.
defeated. Right? The bad guys will be defeated, but like, I can't think, like, thinking of the volumes we've read up to this point, certainly, I can't think of any time that like defeating a hollow seemed disgusting, right? Even though there were times when
Yeah.
hollows did things that seemed horrible and painful to these characters we care about, right? And I think part of it is we're very often rooting for the character who's going through something really difficult and painful. Or if it's sort of happening on both sides, we have an understanding of the other character. I'm thinking of a fight that happens in a later volume, um, where even though you want Ichigo to win, you're you care about the other character. Um, yeah, and I wonder if that's part of it on a storytelling level, right? Because there
Yeah.
is the sort of the way it's done artistically. I think I agree, right? There's not a reveling in it. It's sort
Mm-hmm.
of, but then on a storytelling level, um,
Yeah.
it feels like challenges that people we care about are having to face, rather than something like a horror movie where we're sort of, at least certain kinds of horror movies where you're almost supposed to glorify in it or something.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree. Huh. Well,
All right, so go ahead.
we've delved into the reason we enjoy this, or we can stomach it
Yeah,
at least.
yeah.
Shall we continue?
So then there's a sudden change uh where Ichigo's probably two more pages forward, two or three, where Ichigo's sword is suddenly mostly gone, and uh Ichigo is just right. He's just about, he's seemingly has started to turn the tables a little bit on Renji. but his sword is gone, right? It's like it's been sliced maybe a foot, right? And he has this sort of huge Zanpakuto, this comically large Zanpakuto. And again, just Kubo is this great kind of cinematic storyteller, uh, where you have this page of just confusion over the blade's disappearance, and then you see uh, a hand holding his sword, and it zooms out, and you see that Byakuya just has it, drops it to the ground, pulls his own Zanpakuto out, and then, without Ichigo even really being able to see it, glides by him and seemingly stabs him through the chest, but you can't see it, right? And he just starts to spurt blood. And this is just, and also this I think is a bit of Kubo's artistic genius, right? That you can have this very visceral, intense confrontation with Renji,
mm-hmm.
and then have this almost ethereal counteroffensive, not counteroffensive, but sort of attack from Byakuya, as he like seemingly sort of floats by.
Yeah.
And they're both really dramatic.
Yeah. I love this sequence, and I feel like this is where he's kind of expanding some of his storytelling ability, because I had the same reaction when I was reading this, because you're all invested in this fight and you're like, wait, what's going on? You know, like all of a sudden it's, why is his sword like cut in two? So you're sharing kind of Ichigo's confusion, and then kind of dawning realization of like, wait, that guy just like broke his sword. This is something that you would not have expected to happen with such ease. There's a few other moments in this series, I feel like, as we go, where you have that kind of shocking, just like twist where someone's just so much better than the hero that and demonstrates it in just kind of a way that you're catching up with the main characters as to what's going on. And then this is something that I feel like he does so well, that communicates the absolute like speed that he's moving at, in a way that, but it's not using any like typical kind of manga conventions in like speed lines or blurring. It's like you're getting like a slow motion kind of scene, because he's in the same position, doesn't even realize what's going on, Ichigo, and then Bakuya is just, like you said, gliding by. This is something he'll do more, I feel like, as the fights get faster and faster, where he kind of slows down this time, and it's really effective, and I think really hard to do, probably, to figure out how to communicate what's going on, but it's so good.
And it's funny because it also, I think, he'll use this kind of technique, as you indicated, later on, but I feel like this sort of first use of it is so effective also because it fits so well with Byakuya's character. Because there is this, both because of how sort of aristocratic he is, that he's kind of above this, but then also just that his abilities are so far beyond not just like Ichigo's abilities, but even like Ichigo's conception of what one's abilities can be.
Right. Yeah. He just doesn't know how to fight anything like this.
Yeah. Well, he doesn't even, it's not even that, right? Like it's almost like, you're really good at your dojo, but the head of your dojo is a yellow belt. And suddenly you see a black belt, right? And you've had like 2 years of being taught by a yellow belt. And it's like suddenly a black belt appears, and it's just like, what in the world is going on here? Right? It's sort of like, it's beyond anything. Like, it's not just, oh, I can't do this. It's like, this is completely new to me.
Right.
And that, like, I think that's just a really hard thing to communicate, right? That's a sort of universal experience. I think we've all had that happen to us in some realm, but it just works so well.
Yeah.
So, Ichigo, right, and then we get this painful scene of Ichigo falling, and Byakuya says, "You're slow even to fall." Um, Rukia now is kind of reintroduced, yelling Byakuya's name, and it then switches to kind of Renji's inner monologue. And again, this is one thing I have such a strong sense of defense of both caption boxes and thought bubbles, and I think like American, particularly superhero comics, avoiding both so scrupulously is to their detriment, because this volume and the one before, using a bit of interior monologue for Rukia and Ichigo and Renji, is really effective. So we kind of enter Renji's mind. As he says, "It's been a long time since I saw him in action. He's still peerless. I can only catch a glimpse of the second stroke, just a blur. I never saw him draw his sword. I never saw him sheathe it. And I know him well. The boy probably doesn't even know what hit him."
Yeah.
Then we get Ichigo on the ground.
Yeah.
But then Renji is sort of reflecting a little more. But what was that abnormal spiritual pressure of his? Right, we're starting to get a sense. There's sort of things in these two volumes that are not going to be explained for about 45 volumes, 45 or 50 volumes, which is sort of frustrating for those who are reading it. But me having read it, I'm no spoilers. I'm sometimes impressed by the ways that Kubo has pieces that do end up making sense, despite you not knowing the details. And Renji is kind of annoyed at Byakuya having at Byakuya entering in and saying, "I could have done it myself." And Byakuya says, "Come now, even I get rusty if all I ever do is watch." And Renji thinks, "No, not this man." So Rukia goes to run to Ichigo, and Renji slams her against like some pole. Just let go of me, Renji. Ichigo goes, "Forget him. The boy is dead. Don't make things worse for yourself by crying over a corpse. Listen, if you so much as touch him, they'll add 20 years to your sentence." She says, "I don't care. I got Ichigo into this. He was killed because of me. What's wrong with going to him? He gave his life for me." "Even though your punishment would be increased," this is Byakuya, "you feel you must go to this boy?" She says, "Brother, I understand, Rukia. This child looks very much like him. And you'll find out who that is, and much more about who's being referenced in future volumes in really heartbreaking story come later on." Ichigo says, "I'm dead. I look like somebody. You better not be telling the story while I'm not around." And then Byakuya says, "So you must not want that hand," and is about to clearly attack him, but whose foot appears but Rukia's, kicking Ichigo's hand away from Byakuya. And he starts to ask, "What are you doing, Ru? You're a mere human. How dare you touch my brother Shihakusho? Know your place, boy."
Man.
And like clearly sort of trying to be merciful.
She's doing the old yeller kind of thing. Like, go away, we don't love you.
Yeah.
Right.
And "Let us go, brother. The boy's actions have awoken Rukia Kuchiki. Take me to the Soul Society. I shall humbly pay for my crime." And Renji and Byakuya both think, okay, he's going to die. Rukia, but even if he doesn't, he'll have no spiritual energy left. Rukia tells him to be still, move 1 inch from there. Try coming after me, and I will never forgive you. You don't have long to live. Lie there and think of happier times. And right, Byakuya says, as I said, right, that even if he survives on a very small chance, he wouldn't have any more spiritual power, because they think all of his power is just from Rukia, and Byakuya has basically shattered it. They go to the Soul Society, And Ichigo just has this sort of blood-curdling scream with his broken Zanpakuto on the ground as it starts to rain.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that whole fight sequence is just phenomenal and like gives such a sense of what's coming in the next arc in terms of action, but then also a bit about some of the characters we're going to come to care about a lot. Yeah. I'm just going to pause for a second to get a cough drop. Sorry.
Oh, no problem.
All right. So the next kind of volume and a half, I don't know if we have to go through kind of as blow by blow. But
Well,
really this
it does end
sort
with
of,
Kisuke.
oh
Is
yeah,
it Kisuke?
Kisuke.
Kisuke. Okay.
Kisuke Urahara.
Kisuke Urahara. Yeah. So it shows with, I mean, he appears as, Ichigo's kind of bleeding out on the ground. And I think that's a good transition into pretty much what takes up the rest of, the next two volumes, or these two volumes, more or less. But go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, so this is really sort of Ichigo's kind of training,
Yes.
where he has to first re I don't know, get his Soul Reaper powers back without turning into a hollow,
Mm-hmm.
and learn his Zanpakuto's name.
Yep.
Now, this also kind of foreshadows some stuff that is going to be important in the next arc, but then also, again, is not going to be explained until the final arc in like volume 65 or something. It is satisfying, I think, but it's also very annoying that you have certain things that are just like, what is going on here at some important moments that you don't
Yeah.
really get full explanation for a long time. But rather than, I mean, unless you want to, I'd say, I don't know that we need to do much of a sort of blow by blow of this part so much as kind of a general discussion of it, if you agree.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So what do you kind of you've read some manga but less than I have. What do you kind of think of this training arc here? Anything that kind of sticks out at you about it?
Well, I think it's actually after kind of a fairly intense sequence. I think it's pretty fun. One of my favorite bits is I don't know this girl's name. What's her name? Do you remember?
Oh, I forget.
Yeah,
It's
some
like
little girl
maybe or something.
Yeah, who ends up having to fight, and he's very reluctant at first, but she just is like insanely hard to fight.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of comedy like this where it's very much a Kisuke's philosophy of training, I guess, is just kind of throw them in the deep end and see if they swim. Just kind of ramping up the challenges. So it's intense, but after kind of this dramatic bit, there's a lot of humor. I find it's got a light touch to it that I appreciated, while hinting at some kind of bigger stuff. And I think it also does a good job of really expanding the lore. So we get the first glimpse of Zangetsu. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, Zangetsu, his Zanpakuto, right? Who's sort of he goes into almost this kind of like spiritual realm or something and meets this I don't know, weathered old man, Zangetsu.
Which is a really cool introduction, I think, of this character.
Yeah, it's super effective.
Yeah, yeah, it's neat. So there's expanding kind of how Zanpakutos work. what the Soul Society actually is, who the major kind of players are. Um, uh, it's a very interesting one. I think especially I actually appreciated it more after reading the next two arcs, because you kind of going back to it, you're like, oh, I get kind of where these characters are going, because it's hard to know what to make of. I mean, for example, Mr. Yoruichi, is that how you pronounce the name?
Yoruichi-san, yeah, Yoruichi, the black
Yoruichi-san,
talking cat.
Yeah, you're like, what's this cat doing here? Who becomes a major character? And spoiler alert, it's not a him actually, but everyone's kind of confused by it. So there's definitely stuff that becomes like, oh, okay, well now reading this again, you kind of appreciate it more.
Yeah.
But still, it's fun. I think it's also interspersed with, some kind of Soul Society lore. We see Rukia.
And crucially, right, Rukia is not sentenced to 50 or 100 years or something, but is going to be getting the death penalty, which we're told is extraordinarily rare and seems crazy for a crime, but like not something that would normally, and we're going to find out in the next arc why this happened. And we also start to get a bit of a sense of kind of Renji and Rukia's relationship. And also, right, there is that very strong, as I said, kind of, I don't mean to just say aristocratic over and over again, but that's sort of what fits it. This kind of aristocratic sense of honor and duty that Byakuya and Rukia share, as she's kind of facing death, and not just sort of death and moving on to the next world, but seemingly a kind of complete destruction.
Hey, sorry about that.
No worries. Last thing I said was that that also it's not just kind of a death penalty and then moving on to the next world or something, but seemingly a permanent destruction of her very being, her soul.
Yeah, which I don't know, kind of like raises the question for me of, like, it's weird that you have a death penalty for souls, I guess, but it's a very physical kind of death penalty, which explains it to me. But this is one of, I think, the little quirks of Bleach, is the souls seem very physical compared to human bodies. It's not clear what the distinction is between a soul and the Soul Society. I mean, even to the fact that as this world expands, we see, like, there's almost no difference. Like, you bleed, it's like, maybe you just don't die. I guess you're semi-immortal. But yeah, that is the metaphysics of this place do raise some questions. But maybe you shouldn't. Maybe we don't need to look too closely. But
and meanwhile, Orihime, Chad, and Uryu are all also training and intend to go with Ichigo to try to rescue Rukia. And they sort of are being taught, as you know, by the cat, the talking cat Yoruichi, um, and are kind of getting a sense of their powers, right, and learning how to control them. Much less dramatically and and very sort of comedically, um, but
Yeah.
I kind of like seeing that. And then there's this really sort of after the training finishes, there's this chapter, the last summer vacation, um, where Ichigo and all of his high school friends kind of come together to go see fireworks, and it's it's very fun and funny. And then there's this really lovely sort of scene between Orihime and her best friend Tatsuki, um,
Yeah.
that I don't know. I really like their friendship. We've talked about it in previous volumes, or from previous episodes, but they apparently come to the edge of the water here every year. And the first year they did a few years back, um, Orihime saw this dragonfly and got so excited that she like ran after it, and Tatsuki looked for her for 2 days. And Orihime was just, I remember that. A fisherman in Yokohama brought me some sushi. It was really good. Um, and she says, did I ever tell you my brother could catch red dragonflies on his finger? He'd point up to the sky and a red dragonfly would fly down and land on it. I loved it. It was like magic. And at the end of this sort of really nice conversation, Rahime says, oh, I'm just going to my aunt's for a while. I'll be back. She says to Tatsuki, when summer vacation's over, then let's come here and watch red dragonflies again. The fireworks start going off, and they realize, oh, we gotta get going. We need to get to a better place to see it. Orihime thinks, thank you, Tatsuki, but don't worry, because you always look for me. You always look for me, that I feel safe no matter where I go. If I go somewhere where you can't find me, wait for me. I promise I'll come back here to be with you.
Yeah.
And there's this nice scene. Ichigo is, uh, I guess actually that's in the one I'm thinking of is in the next chapter. But when Ichigo leaves, his dad, right, just thinks he's going on a trip for a few weeks. But being Ichigo's dad, he's sort of ridiculous and insane, and tries to, is like waiting on the roof to jump on him. And
Yeah.
but he says, before you went, I wanted to give you this. And he said, what's this dirty old piece of junk? Hey, it's not dirty. That's a talisman your mother gave me a long time ago. It'll bring you good luck. And he says, what are you thinking? I can't take this. And he said, well, of course not. You can't have it for keeps. I'm just lending it to you for your trip. Give it back to me when you get back. He says, hey, don't just stare at it. You better give it back. If you lose it, I'll shave my beard off. It's mine. And Ichigo says, sure. Since when is shaving a threat? Um, yeah, and they, Chad, Orihime, Uryu, Ichigo, and Yoruichi all enter Kisuke's, let's say, unofficial kind of jank entrance to the Soul
The
Society,
Soul
where they'll
Society.
have something
Yeah.
like 9 minutes to get through this long tunnel, or they'll be stuck in a limbo space forever. And that is the end of the sort of first main arc of Bleach before we get to the Soul Society arc.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. Do you have kind of any closing thoughts on these early volumes of Bleach, and kind of um what sticks out at you about them?
Yeah, I think these it's going to get better, but I think it's a very, very strong start to this series. I mean, I was hooked at this point. Um, it's unclear where exactly it's going. I'd say for the first arc, it seems like, okay, is this just going to be, like you said, a kind of monster of the week? We're just going to be keep on amping up hollows. You get that sense maybe with when the Menos Grande shows up that it's okay. Now we're getting to the big monsters, but it really does take a almost kind of it turns into almost a conspiracy. There's a mystery that goes on, and it gets quite a bit better, and the universe expands in a way that I wasn't really expecting. But up to this point, I think it's funny. My son who loves Bleach, and he's 13. He's been going. He's been like, I really want to, like, I was like, well, what do you want to do, like, for your life? He's like, I want to do a job where, like, I help people or, like, I save people, and stuff. And I'm like, I get that. And I think, this is kind of, it's wish fulfillment, but it's like good wish fulfillment for young boys. You know what I mean? It's like the kind of wish fulfillment you want, where it's like, hey, I'm a young man, and what I'm doing is I'm protecting people, I'm helping people, I'm being loyal to my friends. I have honor, I have strength that I'm using in a productive way. I'm not being selfish. So there's a lot of just like there's a lot of good in this. So it gets my recommendation, especially for that age group. I think it's a fantastically drawn story. It's well told. It's funny, but it doesn't. With maybe a few exceptions, it also seems to be trying to stimulate kind of noble virtues to some degree, which I think gets it a pretty hearty recommendation for the right age, I'd say, from me.
Yeah, there's really strong themes, like particularly of kind of self-sacrifice, and friendship, loyalty, in ways that don't feel didactic. And really, I mean, the thing that I'm so aware of coming back to it is just how quickly Kubo developed this really distinctive mode of rendering action that is just so like it. I once heard sort of a lecturer on art talk about the idea that with a really excellent painting, sometimes you can sort of look really carefully at some aspect of it and say, like, I can't imagine it different. I couldn't imagine Starry Night differently, right? Like, it's just that it's sort of perfectly composed somehow. But obviously it actually took an artist making a lot of decisions to figure out how to do these things. And Bleach is this way, where when I read it previously without sort of having to kind of talk about it for a while afterwards, it was just sort of like, oh yeah, obviously this action is really cool and like I can follow it. And now I see just like how carefully constructed each page is and each panel is. In a way that's just I think like one of the best in terms of mangas in terms of depiction of action, and just like really you just fall in love with the characters.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I think that's the they're real characters too. No one's perfect, right? No one is a fully idealized. You get to see them struggle, you get to see them grow, you get to see their shortcomings and failures and all that kind of stuff. But they're also characters that you grow to love, and want to see. It's not just pure spectacle of action. It's not just. And so I think there's a lot of care given to the characters. There's a lot of thought put into them, and yeah, it's great. I highly recommend it, and I'd say if you're 12 and up, it's something that it's worth reading.
Yeah. All right. So next week we'll be reading a whole bunch more from the Smithsonian collection of newspaper comics. I think we'll be getting up through something like 1936. So we'll get to talk about a bunch of obscure daily comic strips. Well, we'll get to read a bunch of Mutt and Jeff and the Gumps and a bunch of others. So that'll be fun. And the week after that, I think we're going to be turning our attention to Hellboy. So hope that you'll join us for that. So if you enjoyed this episode of Truth Beauty Comics, there are 3 things you can do for the podcast to support it. The first is to just keep listening and tell your friends about it.
What is the second thing, Felix? I guess I should know this by now, but I don't have my notes up.
Oh, you don't have your notes up. Okay, then I'll read the whole
Let me pull it up. All right.
The second is to review the podcast, giving it 5 stars wherever you listen to us. And the last thing you can do is to consider contributing to our Patreon with a monthly donation. For as little as $3 a month, you can get perks like access to exclusive episodes, voting on topics for upcoming episodes, and even an original drawing from Levi. Most of all, you can help make this podcast sustainable. That's the end of the episode. You can reach us at truthbeautycomics.com or on our social media accounts. Thanks for listening, and remember to take comics seriously and have fun while doing it.
All right.
All right.